Welcome to another episode of Rock the Cradle. Today, I'm very, very excited to have Chen Weihua with us. Weihua is or was recently retired, I think August last year. His position as a columnist and very, very senior positions at China Daily, I think bureau chief of China Daily in the EU, and Washington correspondent and deputy editor of China Daily USA. He has been a recipient of amazing journalistic accolades. He was a Knight Fellow at Stanford University, a World Press Institute Fellow, and a Freedom Forum Fellow. But best of all, I think Weihua is your presence on Twitter. I think it's how most journalists from other regions of the world got to know China through you, Weihua. And I say this because for our viewers who do know him and follow him, you may not know that there's an actual channel on, an account on Instagram, which celebrates Weihua. And it's called, hold on, let me see if I can find this now. It's called Victims of Chen Weihua. It's fantastic because I think, Weihua, you set a tone that we normally don't hear from Chinese officials or journalists or netizens. You know, there was some snark in there. There was a lot of humor. And I mean, you caught everyone's attention. And you have, of course, a huge following on Twitter. But best of all, I really think you cracked the code for many of us journalists from other regions of the world by introducing us to China via English and via the snark that we were not used to. This, by the way, Weihua, this got me falling off my chair laughing. So Japanese account is saying the PM Takaichi says she's sleeping 2 hours a day, 4 at most, hardworking woman. And Weihua gets in there and says, is that an excuse for being insane? And it's fantastic. It's the dry humor that we've come to expect from you and has embroiled us in the interesting world of Asian geopolitics. So, Weihua, I want to chat a little bit about your recent retirement. And when we met up in Shanghai, I think in maybe September, October of last year, you said, you know, you've been overseas for so long in Washington and then I think in Brussels, that you wanted to rediscover China. So you've had a good few months to do that. Tell us some of your impressions.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it's so good to see you again. Even virtually, but yeah, I think Twitter is what connect two of us also. But thank you again for the very kind introduction. I would say, my retirement since the end of last August has been fantastic. I've been away from China for almost 16 years as a foreign correspondent. Even I, traveled back to China occasionally for, vacations. But still, I have been away for too long. So, and China is really one of the fastest changing country in the world. I mean, I can testify just in my last 5-6 months of traveling in China, I spent 2 months driving, with my wife across the Yunnan province in northwest China, which is the size of like Germany, and it's bordering Vietnam, Myanmar, so it's a very beautiful province with a rich culture and a nature landscape. I would highly recommend it there. It's so beautiful. And so I've been driving through the Guangdong province. I'm actually heading in a few days to the Hainan Island, which is, really the one of the biggest islands in China. So it's a province. So there was so much more, China is the size more than the 27 European Union countries combined. So there was so much to do. I mean, so I cannot wait. It was, seems not enough time because I actually, it's not just China. I want to see other parts of the world too. Even I traveled so much, but there was some travel before was more superficial, very short. So there was so much, yeah, to do.
Anything that surprised you in all these years away where you went, wow?
Yeah, I mean, it was like Yunnan. Actually, if people understand China, Yunnan is not particularly known as a developed region. It's not actually. Sometimes people would describe as underdeveloped. But when I see like drones were used by farmers to spread like a fertilizer, those kind of thing in the mountain terrace field. Oh my God, it's like 21st century. I mean, it's I didn't see that in Europe even, traveling a lot in Europe. I didn't see that. But, this is not, you're talking about Shanghai, Beijing, is a very well developed coastal city. It's really the southwest, in China's case, called the less developed regions. And the roads, the bridges, the tunnels, are definitely world class. I'm not to mention, I mean, China's 50,000 kilometers of high speed rails. I want to travel on railways these days, not fly, because railway is so fast and convenient. And you can see, I mean, the sceneries around the road. And so that's, I would highly recommend to anyone coming to China.
Well, that one of the things that's surprised us all, I mean, really, in some sense, Weihua, we can thank Trump's tariff threats for opening China up to the world even more, for sort of Western netizens to jump onto Chinese social media platforms and learn directly from the Chinese about their country. But ever since then, ever since last year and the tariffs war, when that started, I feel like so many people here are either traveling to China, they never thought to do that before. They're seeing amazing TikToks of the developments in the major cities. Of course, the major cities are shocking to see. They really do look like 22nd century cities. But I think for journalists who've sort of pried deeper, it's the enormous efficiency. I mean, that the Chinese government can call on tens of millions of blue collar workers, to when they decide to switch a focus on a sector in China to develop it. You have tens of millions who get trained and very proficient at working that sector, and then they move on, and then they move on. And it's like it's almost a miracle that these things are springing up overnight. We've seen the development of solar panels, right? We've seen the development of hydroelectric power. We've seen China has probably the most advanced electricity generating system, and has a surplus of it than any country ever in history. So those are the kind of things I think that are shocking. Even reversing desertification of areas. It's
Yeah.
perseverance, failing, persevering some more, failing, and then finally, even if it's 20 or 30 or 40 years later, finding the formula. I'm going on a lot, but I'm sure these things have also struck you as
Oh.
pretty incredible.
Yeah, very much. I would say just 2 points. I already mentioned the June. I mean, the technology revolution in China is just amazing. It's just not you talk about space industry or it's everyday life. I mean, check into a hotel, not even like a five-star hotel. The robots. I mean, the in the reception, you're waiting to deliver anything. I mean, you need anything, just the robots come, and everything is like modernized. It's like 22nd century, and also, as you mentioned, the internet, the mobile, the cell phone signal, wherever you travel in China, in the remote mountain region, it's a very strong signal, very good. I mean, I drive in Germany and I lost 4G when you went to 3G, and I so you cannot connect even to GPS. So no, I respect Germany a lot. But anyway, China caught up tremendously. And second, I want to say that the government efforts in cleaning up the environment, if you just recall 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, China had a lot of pollution issues. But now, I mean, the government, the top leaders, slogan of Green Mountain, lush water, lucid water is a gold mountain. I think it really pays off. Actually, you see the countryside, it's so much more cleaner. I mean, everywhere is much more cleaner. I saw the other day when a street cleaner tried to pick up a tiny leaf. I said, oh, just leave it there. You don't have to bother. But they're just meticulously about, I mean, making it so clean these days. And but anyway, that's everything is so, turning much better. I mean, if you look at the housing conditions, people, I mean, actually there is a surplus. That's also another problem. But anyway, people's housing conditions are much better. The food, traveling. The latest statistic is that just during the past spring festivals, so-called Chinese New Year, and it's like your Christmas, in Europe or other places, the biggest festival in the year. The traveling number of people is 9.6 billion, which is more than the whole world's population. So, which is like a Chinese traveling just like crazy, because it's the biggest. The people go home, go to the scenic spots, traveling. So, yeah, so we have a big population. It's 1.4 billion people. So, yeah, but that's still quite amazing, right?
It is amazing. I mean, when I was in Shanghai and I decided one day to go to, to do the sort of the river tour, of the
Hmm.
buildings and things, I saw so many Chinese tourists there, more than European. Of course, I was there during a major Chinese holiday, so it
Hmm.
explains exactly what you're saying. These are the places where Western expats and Western, foreign travelers coalesce. But in this case, because it was a Chinese holiday, you just saw an overwhelming amount of even rural Chinese. I mean, you could tell, they were there to come to visit the big city and see the lights and whatnot. So I think that's extraordinary. But I think the other point, and then I will stop talking just about China, because it did make an impact, of course. It does. I find this when people go to Iran for the first time, they go, what? You know, what? Look at the buildings, look at the cleanliness, look at the organization, look at the trees and the parks and the subway stations, and things that a lot of other countries in the region outside of the small emirates, of the Persian Gulf don't have. One other thing that struck me, and I did see this in Iran too, is despite the accelerated modernization of the country, culture and community still rule. And that's not what, in the West, that's not the model. Modernization meant leaving behind of traditions. But my favorite moment in China was when I was in Guangzhou for the big trade show, because I wanted to see how people come from all over the world to buy Chinese wares, goods. Was near my hotel, there was a little square, okay, that roads didn't go through. There were like some shops and convenience stores and stuff around this little square, and it had some trees, and it was very like charming little area. And every single night I would go out there, because you'd see elderly Chinese citizens. One night they'd be dancing, one night
Yeah.
it's mahjong, one night it's drinking, one night it's, and I also realized that the elderly there had found their own way to create a community for themselves. Given the one child policy that reigned in China for many, many years, their adult children are raising their young children, maybe in some other place of China, making a living. And so instead of the retirement homes that have flooded Western, cities and provinces and stuff, in the cities, Chinese elderly are making their own lives and building their own community. I thought that was quite rare, I have to say.
Yeah, I think tradition is still very strong in many parts of China, especially if you go to, provinces, I would say. I mean, the tradition. My ancestral hometown in Fudan, actually, northeast, in southeast China, across straight from the Taiwan Strait, and the cousins there just phoned me 2 days ago. I mean, their family. I mean, there's a Lantern Festival in China. That's marked the end of the Chinese New Year celebration. There was a big family gathering. I don't know. It's like 30 people sitting there. How they got that big table, and there was like 40, 50 dishes on the table. And so anyway, it was kind of a tradition very strong there. It's good. I mean, I actually, if you go to especially the people are kind of, the traditional neighborhood. People are friendly. The Chinese saying goes that, the next door neighbor is better than a relative far away. So, which means, your next door neighbor, it's like a family. I remember, my neighbor was, when I was a child, I would deliver food, when they cook some delicious food, they say we should sample it. And so anyway, it's all about sharing. But I would say it was kind of lost in some, if you move into a big skyscraper these days. But anyways, it's very strong still in areas where lots of senior citizens, especially because the retirees, as you mentioned, they like to assemble, gather, whether for mahjong, dancing. I would not. Sometimes would feel, oh my God, if some people live there with the music at night, it could be a little bit noisy, but those people are having fun. Obviously, I'm so happy because it's obviously a very healthy exercise.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of exercise, these 80-year-old men with muscles jogging in the morning, it was just quite something. But let me ask you, let's dive a little bit into the political sphere. I want to take you straight to West Asia, this region, because I thought you'd retired, but obviously you're still writing, because I found a column of yours on the U.S. war against Iran just now, and I mean this week. So one of the facts are that we've always been told China is very energy dependent on importing energy. We know that I think China imported about 520 million barrels of oil from Iran in 2025, right? I think second only to how much it imports from Saudi Arabia, but it's something like half of China's crude oil imports are from the Persian Gulf region. The Chinese government are planners. They, I'm sure, anticipated, especially now that Iran is a strategic partner of Beijing's, they've probably anticipated this great confrontation. Do you have any inkling on how they're preparing for it? Because most countries in Europe have about 3 months supply, right? I think China probably the same. Of course, it's diversified. It's energy resources, right? I mean, solar, hydro, electric, etc. But how do you think the Chinese government is planning for a long-term, the potential of this war, this conflict now in the Persian Gulf being a long-term one.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to mention, even I retired. I mean, they say journalists will never retire,
Oh,
so I
it's so
still keep writing a column. I just, but anyway, I also, go to colleges to give seminars, things like that. But just back to the topic in Iran. I mean, it's you saw my column today. I mean, I think if you read the Chinese government statement or the social media in China, the Chinese government, the Chinese people, 1.4 billion, are overwhelmingly condemning the U.S. and Israeli unprovoked, attack against Iran. I mean, it was totally based on lies. I mean, as you know, even U.S. intelligence community doesn't support, and the IAEA said Iran is not developing nuclear weapons. I mean, you actually have, the U.S. Closest allies in Europe, like Spain, publicly condemn the U.S. So, they usually go follow blindly, any U.S. policies, but this time around it's different. So it shows how U.S. has lost hearts and minds by waging this, unlawful war against Iran. But I would say, I mean, back to your question about energy, yes, Iran is a key Chinese partner, strategic partner, and energy supply. But as all the Middle Eastern countries, the Gulf states are, many of them have major energy cooperation with China. I mean, they supply the China with crude oil, natural gas, but China also actually helped them with some clean energy projects in solar,
Mm.
wind. So because China is very good at that these days, but China's energy now is quite diversified. As you said, I actually read the number. The Chinese storage could last much longer. It's more like more than 100 days, some between 100, 200 days. But anyway, I mean, this conflict in the Persian Gulf is not serving not just China, but anyone. I mean, if you look at Japan, South Korea, some Southeast Asian nations, they all depend on the, Gulf states for energy resources. India, I mean, they are desperate, obviously, because some of them have much lower storage than capacity than China has. China has been preparing a lot in the last years, and so, but anyway, that's already causing energy prices to skyrocket in Europe, on the world market, and in China as well. So that's nature. So it's bad for the global economy, for every economy trying to recover. And so that's why the Chinese had been calling for cessation of hostilities. I mean, aggressions. We saw this barbaric bombing by U.S. and Israel. I mean, the tragic scene of bombing this school. Killing like 160 school children in Iran. I don't know, this horrific scene. I mean, it's going to be in people's minds for very, very long time. So that's the brutality of this totally unnecessary war, I think, and I think Trump is, I mean, he wants to become a peace president, but I mean, he obviously a war president now.
Yeah.
So, but I would say that the whole world, I mean, not just China, hope the hostilities will end soon. There will, because ultimately we believe there is no solution in the battlefield. There is only diplomatic solution, because as I mean, sometimes the U.S. might believe has the strongest army, so it can solve anything with the military. There is a military solution. No, you can tell that from Afghanistan, from
Mm.
Iraq. I mean, from Afghanistan is the typical case. After 20 years, they have to welcome back Taliban, the same people they kicked out. I mean, they toppled. So military solution does not exist. You only incite, sow the seeds of hatred among the population by killing schoolgirls, by bombing their cities. And that kind of a hatred is going to last for generation probably sometime. So to that, it's not good. I mean, it's hardly a win, I mean, for the United States, even if they want to brag the military power. And so I think a peaceful solution, as you know, mediated by country like Oman, other Gulf states, should continue. But now, obviously, the problem is the U.S. had a little trust at the negotiation table because they waged this attack right in the middle of the negotiation. So who is going to trust you in the negotiation anymore? That's the big problem. I mean, not just for Iran. I mean, for other countries who is going to the negotiation table with Washington.
I imagine that Chinese President Xi Jinping and Foreign Minister Wang Yi must be having, in some respects, the time of their lives. For years, they've been preaching peaceful modernization and win-win solutions, right? I mean, they showed us how it's possible when Beijing brokered the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, right? They show that they can have relations with all countries and strategic partnerships even with most countries. But now that we're in a position where, as you said, it's caused ruptures between the US and its traditional allies in Europe and elsewhere. Now we have Canadian Prime Minister Carney heading to Beijing. You even have the British and the Germans making, opening doors with China and Chinese officials on various collaborations. They are looking at China as a plan B. But it's not like China dominates everything and can open the doors to everything. It's just that China is viewed as the most natural competitor of the United States globally, and no longer can it be left out of your calculations as a country anymore. And you're living in Brussels. You've seen the incredible, I guess, the way officials at the EU and throughout Europe, Western Europe, cleave to American narratives, almost no backbones, no sovereignty. That, I mean, and I'm sure you're still in touch with many of your colleagues there, that must be changing. I mean, certainly since the President of the United States talked about going into Canada and Greenland in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's changing in Europe these days. I mean, even not everyone, not everyone is like Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. I mean, not as courageous as Prime Minister Sanchez, who publicly, condemned the U.S. a lot, still want to choose to remain silent. Actually, unfortunately, still some try to appease or please Donald Trump. And, if you look at the EU High Representative Kalakayas or people like that. But I would say you are absolutely right in saying that U.S. Dictate much of the EU foreign policy for decades. I mean, EU-China relation was quite good as they actually constructed the so-called comprehensive strategic partnership. But when I arrived, just actually a few months after I arrived in 2019, March 2019, the European Commission's memo started to describe China not as a comprehensive strategic partner, but
Mm.
as a, sort of a cooperation partner, economic competitor, systemic rival. So that sort of a thing intensified, stepped the tension. And also under the Biden administration's pressure, the EU literally sort of froze the EU-China bilateral agreement on investment. So that's really actually that agreement, as I talked to an EU trade official, is actually going to do a big favor for EU business. So in that sense, EU is committing suicide because China gave away a lot of concession in that agreement. So so when you look back at the EU economic recession here, there, in Germany in particular, the largest EU economy, you cannot blame others but themselves. They cut Russian energy, cheap Russian energy. They let Ukraine blow up the Nord Stream, and they instead resort to LNG from the US, which is several times more expensive. And, for obvious reason, you have to transport from far away across the Atlantic. And also when actually Trump actually weaponized the energy trade, I mean, the tariff war against the EU. So I don't know why, EU, I think there was some awakening. They've been calling for strategic autonomy, such as from President Macron, but I don't think it is consistent also. But so overall, the U.S. Had this overwhelming outside the clout over EU politics, or in every aspect of the society, I would say. So it's quite sad to me, which makes them blindly following the U.S. policy, as for example on China. They start to repeat the U.S. nonsense regarding China as adversary, as a threat. I mean, if you talk about war and conflict, China has not been involved in any conflict or war since the 3-week border clash with Vietnam in 1979. So we have the best track record among all the major countries. I mean, the U.S. Probably have only 17 years of its entire history without war. So, the reality could not be far different from the Western narrative.
To that exact point, that China has not been involved in wars anytime recently, that people around the world are saying, where's China on Gaza? Where's China on Venezuela? And now where's China on Iran? When I was in Shanghai and had the privilege of meeting various West Asia experts or international relations experts during the very short time I was there, I always heard back that it's not a role we're seeking. In some way, the world has been groomed because of US hegemony and the way the US acts on the global stage, as though there needs to be a policeman that steps in and solves every problem, usually with a hammer, right? And that's not our goal. Our goal is, Chinese interest, developing China's economy, making sure we're taking care of our people, planning for the future, making sure our direct environment is safe, because obviously China is also the subject of US belligerence and Western belligerence in its waterways, in the islands surrounding it, in the peninsula below it, and so forth. And I fully understand that. I often say, at the Cradle, why should X country in the region act like this? Just because the Americans do and have created almost like a neural pathway for the rest of us to think that this is how countries should act. No, the essence of the UN Charter, et cetera, besides sovereignty and territorial integrity, is non-intervention in the affairs of other states, right? So I really understand the interest-driven foreign policy and how it can switch from one day to the next. But in this case, and I think this is largely true, if you look at China's main foreign policy objectives, and this was told to me by the Chinese ambassador to Beirut in like 2010, 11, 12, around then. He said, we have three, at the time, three main foreign policy objectives. And I don't remember entirely what they were, but I do remember that one was energy, securing energy, okay? But today, the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, is a Chinese foreign policy objective. It's a priority, right? So two of these things intersect West Asia. To just stand by and let, not just your global competitor, but the country whose military is naming you as their number one foe in the world, get away with degrading and destroying your strategic allies, those who have contributed to China's strategic depth, like Iran. I think it begs an answer from people. It's not that anyone expects China to come in with guns blazing to defend Iran. And we have heard, for instance, of behind the scenes, no confirmations really, but behind the scenes, the Chinese government assisting Iran in identifying targets through satellite, satellite visuals and et cetera, and that kind of intelligence. What do you know about that? And what do you say about what I'm saying, that at some point China will have to step up to protect its strategic depth, and maybe Iran is that first real world example?
Well, I would say this. I think, you already mentioned some. I think number one, China firmly believe, the international order should support the United Nations Charter, international law, the UN at the center. Otherwise, we are all going to live in the law of the jungle. That's not good for anyone, because we should not contribute to that, because if if we believe U.S. act like a rogue nation, that doesn't mean everyone else should go rogue like a rogue nation.
Yeah.
I don't believe that, because they kill children, you should kill children too. No, but we should, I think, rally the international community. As we mentioned earlier, even Europeans are waking up. They used to follow blindly the United States. So that's our hope. In order resolving not just this U.S.-Israeli aggression against Iran, but as you mentioned, the kidnapping of the Venezuelan President Maduro, and the attack on Venezuela, and its threat and embargo on Cuba, so for decades, more than 6 decades, and being condemned by the UN General Assembly for 33 years consecutively. So international community uniting in that sense. So yes, that's not going to solve this problem immediately overnight, because the U.S. hegemonic power. But as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. Display of hegemonic power actually, and even the U.S. leaders try to portray it as a win, their victory, as their might. But to the rest of the world, it's a bully, and it's a loss of hearts and minds among the world's community. So it's not good for them, actually. And this decline, you look at the Gaza genocide and all the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan. So you start to think, the U.S. Hegemony probably is counting down. The people are waking up. We hope there will be a multilateral system, multipolar world. Where China, of course, will be one a big country. Second largest economy and the largest in PPT, and so PPP, and Europe, obviously, a very important place. And we that's why you mentioned the Belt Road Initiative. I mean, China's rationale is because China obviously performed quite well in the past 4+ decades, in making an economic miracle, becoming the second largest economy, infrastructure, renewable energy, education, science, technology. So we hope, I mean, this good experience could be useful to our brothers like in Africa. But I think the Chinese firmly believe in this. We need to build a multipolar world, not a unipolar world, as the United States dominated for the last few decades, or you would say, I mean, after the Cold War. So that's we strive for. And the military, as I mentioned earlier, there will be no military solution, and because people, some would say, oh, China probably should join militarily. No, I don't. Because that would be a world war, right? If China joined militarily, and it's not going, it's just going to get more people killed, and that's not the goal we try to achieve. We try to, even, on other conflicts, besides this one, we talk about when the Chinese rationale is always called them both sides to stop fighting immediately and go to the negotiation table, because this only solution is diplomacy, and you're not going to find a sort of a permanent solution on the battlefield. But the solution on the battlefield is only going to be temporary, and probably is going to make situation worse. I think that's the rational. I don't speak for the government, but that's sort of my understanding. And but if you want to see the support for the Iranian people, Iranian government, you can just check the Iranian embassy statement in China, and they want to thank the Chinese people for the overwhelming support on social media, on the message left on the social media account of the Iranian embassy in China. Yeah, so that's just being
Well,
put out there yesterday, I believe.
yeah, we actually reported on our daily live podcast that the Iranian embassy in Beijing had put out a statement um, thanking the the many Chinese citizens who had called up and contacted them to ask if they could financially support the Iranian, the waging of war against the U.S. and Israel. So that's certainly heartening. But I personally think that it is at some point that um, Iranian strategic partners like China or Russia, when there's an opportunity, will tip this in favor of their strategic ally. But at this point, there's no information on that.
Well, I would say I don't know all the details. I believe, I mean, and political diplomatic support is obviously very, very strong from China. And you mentioned, and obviously Iran has been using our Beidou satellite system, I mean, for a while. So obviously that's better. You won't let the US to cut your GPS,
Mhm.
interrupt your GPS. And so that's, I mean, I know the Beidou. I mean, I covered that actually when they displayed in Vienna. And so I think we are improving. I mean, it's a very good system right now. So I think, but overall, the rationale is, I mean, you mentioned the whole region. It's not because now it seems to the big concern about the war spreading, not just between U.S., Israel, and Iran, but other country in the Gulf, and that's deeply concerning because it's not just for China. I mentioned for Japan, South Korea, other country, India, and so all these countries would hope that there will be de-escalation and secession, because we don't want to see school children being bombed and other innocent civilians being killed, and the war is not good. I don't want to see a war in my lifetime.
Well, Iran, I imagine you also agree, has the right to defend itself under international law. And in this case, to fight a hegemon, right? Maybe the most powerful military in the world, and then Israel, ostensibly the most powerful military in West Asia, requires something more than just um, defending your borders. It's almost like Iran had to take it outside its borders
Hmm.
to stop this. And, you know, the late supreme leader of Iran in 2020, when the Americans assassinated Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's Quds Force, you know, the guy who drove the battle against ISIS in the Levant and Persian Gulf, said that we will no longer tolerate U.S. bases in this region. And it is the presence of U.S. bases um, that kind of keeps the region always, you know, humming, like never peaceful, never being able to focus
Hmm.
entirely on peaceful modernization, right? Here's what's interesting. Um, in the last few days since this war started, you have more and more very important, very connected, very powerful voices in the Persian Gulf coming out publicly and commenting on how the US, having lost a lot of its interceptors and radar systems and interception anti-aircraft platforms, etc., have reached out to South Korea and Japan to provide them, you know, with stock, and but not for the Persian Gulf, U.S. allies, for Israel. And this has sent just absolute indignation and anger throughout the GCC countries. Um, by the same token, in your neighborhood, in Japan and South Korea, they're watching how quickly the US relinquishes protection of its allies. How do you, reading the regional press, give us your view on
Yeah.
how deep that impact goes?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think you are absolutely right. I think the U.S. military bases in the region are legitimate targets for Iran. I mean, because they're being used, directly, indirectly in attacking Iran. I mean, posing a threat. I mean, I'm in China. I'm in Shanghai right now. I mean, if you talking about the U.S. military bases in Asia, certainly in China. I mean, they're like 100, 200. I don't know. I mean, there was hundreds of them in Japan, South Korea, and they're now building the Philippines. And they, oh, I mean, for what? I mean, it's 10,000 miles away from the United States. And I mean, sometimes the incidents sort of happen. It's because with the U.S. aircraft. It's not between Chinese aircraft or South Korea aircraft in the recent case, like in the Yellow Sea. I mean, so even the South Koreans are not happy because the U.S. obviously believe they are the world's policemen, but who give you that role? I mean, the Asians have our own, sort of wisdom to deal with our differences. So I mean, we have been living here for I don't know how many centuries. I mean, China, India. I mean, Iran. We are all ancient civilizations, thousands of years. I mean, we know how to get along with each other. I mean, so as I mentioned, we have not have a war with any country since 1979. So 50 years almost. Like so, and. U.S. bases. I mean, I actually sent a tweet after they were bombed. I said, and when the GCC country were kind of angry, also because obviously, I don't know, maybe it was spill over in the area. But I said you should just kick out the U.S. military bases. I totally want a country like in Japan, Korea, the Philippines, because China is not threatening anyone. I mean, we are, people talk about the border disputes with India. They never realize the Chinese and the Indian soldiers don't carry guns, not a gun. They only have a baton. So, which means they cannot, at least they cannot kill people in mass, right? Because that's why we still have some wisdom. We have sort of border disputes that may not be easily solved because that's sort of a history, a long time. I mean, sometime the South China Sea maritime border disputes. But we have lived along. I mean, get along. I mean, because it's not since 1949. It's way, way before that those disputes exist. And so I think the U.S. has always tried to stir the tension,
Mm,
weaponize those disputes, and try to drive a wedge. And so that's the real source of the problem. And for the Middle East too, I mean, if you look at the trouble, all the wars, which one big one doesn't involve the United States?
mm,
Each every one, major one. I mean, if you look at Iraq, if you look at Syria, Libya, I mean the Gaza, I mean even US provide all the weapons basically, and so political support for Israel. I mean, during the atrocities in the Biden administration, mostly. So I would say um, the Gulf countries should kick out the U.S. bases. I mean, and they should get along. I mean, you mentioned China actually mediate sort of between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That's a great achievement. Other
mm,
probably played a role too. But I think that's the way. I mean, they should uh, seek compromise and reconciliation among the country in the region. They should actually unite. I mean, they should show the rest of the world they can manage their own community, neighborhood, and they don't need the U.S. to mess around. Okay, so and it could be a very peaceful and a prosperous region. Why not? I mean, it has the most natural resources, the oil or other, energy. I mean, they are quick. I mean, very intelligent people. I have, friends who are, Iranian students. I mean, physics, studying physics. I mean, they are very smart
mm.
people. I mean, not just in Iran. I mean, the region. So I think. It means there was a great promise, for future of the region, but this outside influence, the interference, just to plunge the region into war after war. If we haven't forgotten the Iraq War, right? It's not too long ago. And it lasted so long. And now we have this war against Iran. And they promised that, it's already devastating. Now I saw the latest news before we start to talk. I mean, they are moving on to Lebanon. I mean, I
Mm.
just thought it's world is crazy. I mean, every country in this world should make their voice heard to stop this insanity.
I just want to point out, I mean, you're talking about us in West Asia, maybe hammering out strategic agreements and I guess maybe creating new security architecture for the Persian Gulf. I know that China has proposed a plan for this, as have the Russians, as have the Iranians. You know, uh, um, a new security architecture for the Persian Gulf that includes only the littoral states. Now that makes absolute sense, but really, again, Weihua, I have to sort of direct you back to your region, okay, to Japan, to South Korea, because I was in South Korea for 5 weeks in 2024 and then 6 weeks in 2025. And in that 1 year, I noticed a difference in discourse. Maybe it was slight, but in 2024, North Korea frightened the South Koreans. And you did see, I did see a protest. The South Koreans love to protest and rally. Okay, they just love it, even if it's a one-man protest. But in this case, older South Koreans protesting or rallying in favor of reunification. In 2025, I was staying in Myeongdong, which is literally across the Chinese embassy was my hotel. And almost every day there were South Koreans protesting. But what was just amazing to me is a lot of their signs were in English. They were protesting against China. The rhetoric I heard from friends of mine who were, executives in tech, whatever, was, oh, China, China. And these protesters in front of the Chinese embassy had signs in English, some of them about Charlie Kirk's murder. And we've seen this throughout our region. When signs come up in English, there's a foreign hand there. So
Yeah.
how are you gonna tackle a very belligerent tone by the new Japanese prime minister, a sort of more anti-China, at least public propaganda in South Korea, and then India, Modi, who just swings one way and the other, but really ultimately seems to be in the American camp. Do you think the Chinese government feels the noose is tightening, like they're gunning for China next? Because they've got Russia and Ukraine, Iran and the Persian Gulf now conflict.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously, there is some U.S. hawks who have always tried to use, so-called their allies in the region, Japan, South Korea, in particular, against China. But at the same time, I mean, the picture is like this. I mean, economically, China is Japan or South Korea's largest trading partner, and China is the largest trading partner of like 120 or 30 countries in the world. So economically, I mean, we all know that it's a mutual beneficial relationship. But I think the good thing is that actually there was something called the China-Japan South Korea Free Trade Agreement being negotiated. I mean, being negotiated for quite some time. But we are still talking. I mean, people. There was a lot of Chinese tourists to both countries. There was a lot of Japanese, Korean business in China. I mean, the major Japanese business all have joint ventures, sole ventures in China, big investment. I mean, if you're talking about the Toyota cars, Hyundai, so anyway, there was, it's not like the news media like to portray it. I mean, we are kind of have a freezing cold relationship. It's a warm in many areas, but politically, yes. I mean, relation with South Korea is quite good now, and their new leader, actually, new government, is a stark. Major improvement from the previous government, I would say.
Yeah.
And but with Japan's new prime minister, I mean, it's not a surprise because she has been traditionally in her life sort of, we describe the revisionist, revisionist view about World War II. Like obviously, Imperial Japan inflicted a huge harms, not just to China, but to Korea Peninsula, the Philippines, other countries, Malaysia, countries in the region. And she wouldn't recognize all those atrocities. She wanted to justify some of them, such as the comfort woman, and that's deeply troubling because the Japanese politician like her in the top position are nothing like those nobody like those German leaders. German leader, I mean, for decades, I mean, after the Second World War, they're being quite straightforward in apologizing, being, remorseful for what they have did in World War II, against Jewish people, against invading other people. But the Japanese, more except maybe one prime minister, I never had a wholehearted or sincere apology, I would say, and that's really, it's like, oh, we apologize already, we wouldn't want to apologize. But for Germans, it's like they never can apologize enough, I mean, you just look at the German leader every time. But so that's deeply troubling for the Chinese. It's not like we want to stick to the past, but you have to convince the Chinese that you are sincere want to sincerely apologize to Chinese people, the Korean people, and the people in Asia which suffered. So let's move on. But so what's the new Japanese Senator Tanaki uh, position is still, I mean, deeply troublesome, and also she wants to really normalize the Japanese military, which
Mm.
is, a bit concerning. Obviously, there is really, want to very much cooperate, let Japan be sort of a U.S. proxy in a potential conflict with China. So that's a big concern for China. I mean, China doesn't want war. China wants peace with Korea, with Japan, with everyone. So, but the threat is not from China. It's from the U.S. military bases, massive build up around China and in Japan, South Korea in particular.
Well, if Iran succeeds in its efforts, its asymmetrical efforts, maybe it'll create a new military blueprint that China can use to eliminate U.S. bases in its region. I do want to ask, because you never hear about Taiwan except from U.S. commentators. It's all day long, Taiwan, Taiwan. Can you, Weihua, set the record straight on what China's policy is on Taiwan?
Well, I think, yeah, there was a lot of rhetoric, I mean, Western. I think, I said, I'm my ancestor hometown, Fudan, so just across street from Taiwan. Many people in Taiwan actually have an ancestor hometown in Fujian too, just across street. And so basically, we are one family. So, and even, the quote, the so-called Taiwan ROC Constitution said that, I mean, both sides of the Taiwan Strait, the mainland Taiwan, belong to China. There was, so we are not eager to have another war among the Chinese ourselves. No, I mean, my father, late father, fought in the Civil War. I mean, 1940s, and so a lot of Chinese died, and so I think the Chinese government made crystal clear we want to exercise the utmost patience to achieve peaceful reunification, but we will not renounce the use of force if Taiwan goes down the path of independence. Because if you ask, I would say most of the 1.4 billion Chinese, there will be big consensus. There will be no ceding of land anymore. China will not be separated into two countries, because it was also the tragedy after the Second World War. If you look at, obviously Germany reunified, East Germany, West Germany, Vietnam, South, North reunified, but that left only two: China and the mainland Taiwan, also the North and South Korea. So I think it's unfortunate, and but on the good side of the picture is Chinese mainland Taiwan trade enormous, and there was a lot of people to people exchanges too. I mean, all of my family members, almost of them being traveled. I haven't been there, but but they have all been traveled to Taiwan for sightseeing. I mean, a lot of Taiwan businessmen. I live actually in the neighborhood where there was probably the second largest Taiwanese community in Shanghai. So I think that's the good side. I mean, we are not eager to have a war. We don't want a war, but obviously some hawks in Washington try to use that as a tool against China, and against us, to torpedo China's rise economically, technologically, and peacefully. We don't want a war. So that's the rationale, I would say. And to people who believe China is a threat, I know when I was in Europe, when they talk about China as a threat, I always tell them, I said, if China ever invades Germany or Belgium, I will be the first to oppose it, to condemn it. It's not going to happen. It's a crazy nonsense by some Western politicians.
You know, on the economic front, whether it's depriving China of semiconductors or trying to take down Huawei and Chinese 5G projects in Europe and around the world, the US has systematically and incrementally sort of raised the temperature on undermining Chinese industry and access supply chain, right? To remove them from the supply chain. Now China's deciding who it will remove from supply chains as well, whether it's silver or rare earth minerals. That's really interesting. Where's that little fight going to go? Is it China trying to tame Donald Trump to understand we all coexist or none of us exist? You know,
Yeah,
tame yourself. Okay, change your ways, and don't come at us, and then we can all benefit. What's your reading?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because the tariff war, the U.S. being putting a very much like a Cold War era export control, putting Chinese company, especially tech company, on entity, so-called entity list for export control, and that's a big disruption. Not just to Chinese companies, but to the global supply chain. Because, as you know well, I mean, the last few decades, China has actively participated in this globalization process. So we are all interconnected. That's why I say all the German companies are here, all the Japanese companies, actually all the American companies are here. If you look, there is more Starbucks here in China, and GM sells more cars in China than in the US. So all the indication China is not just very open and welcoming to this foreign business, and China is a key part of the global supply chain, and it will be a huge damage, not just to China, but other countries involved. Because, as you could tell, I mean, one iPhone, for example, is at the contribution of maybe 20 countries or more. So if you disrupt one, which means you're not going to have it. So I think the U.S. and Trump especially started this. And obviously they have export control before, but has been escalated much, much more in the first Trump administration, and then continued by the Biden administration, I would say, who tried to undermine, sabotage Chinese economic, technological rise in a very despicable way. I mean, Chinese have been quite, I think, exercise a lot of restraint and being patient. But you are right. We are fighting back. And if we're not going to be bullied, I mean, we do. I mean, China has its strengths, but we're not like the U.S. We're not using it, against any country like the U.S. waging tariff war, basically against all the countries in this world.
I'm gonna sort of, my last question is gonna bring us back a little bit closer to West Asia. It's an issue that's perplexed me. I don't know how much you know about Pakistan, but you have a chief of army who seems to practically live in Washington, Munir, and then you have obviously China's very strategic long-term investment in corridors through Pakistan, CPEC. And we've heard horrible stories about Chinese workers being targeted and like terror attacks, etc., for many, many years. Who does Pakistan stand with? Their head of military is in Washington all the time. They've put a prime minister into prison who was critical of the United States and dared to fly to Moscow to meet with Putin. And here's China providing economic sustenance for a country that financially is so doomed. And where does Pakistan stand on these issues? I mean, do you have any reading on this?
Well, as you know, I mean, from our conversation, China's foreign policy has been always non-interference in others' countries' domestic affairs.
Mm,
So we don't like. We are not like the United States. I mean, Trump talked about any future Iranian leader must have his consent. All those nonsense because U.S. I mean, it's like a U.S. can invade, hijack, kidnap a country's leader, but other country cannot talk very much about the U.S. election. Otherwise, it will be meddling U.S. election. That's nonsense. I mean, Chinese are not like that. We believe that we should we totally believe in this principle of mutual respect and equality. I mean, that's Pakistan has been traditionally, we're neighbor, obviously. I mean, it's a very traditional, close relationship, as you can recall from just even how Henry Kissinger got to China, obviously, right? From Pakistan. And so, but anyway, I mean, it's a long story. Just to make it short, I mean, the relationship between the two countries has been very close. And you mentioned the economic corridor. Obviously, as I mentioned, Pakistan obviously can play a very important role in this Silk Road, Belt Road project. And we hope. It's totally my personal view. I have a good friend. I mean, who are from Pakistan, fellow journalists. We studied together. But it's unfortunate. I mean, they have this sort of political instability sometimes. You talk about the Chinese workers being attacked. I mean, obviously, it's not attacked by the government. It's attacked by terrorists or sort of organization or others. But I hope it's not just Pakistan. Some other country have the similar issue. I mean,
mm,
with Chinese investment, and that's why it's for them to sort it out. And my
mm,
hope is for these countries. I mean, the government to build social stability. I mean, if you want to grow economy, uh, build a prosperity for your people, and you need to have stability. If you have instability, I mean, you're not going to achieve this economic success. Because it can't go ahead because one road might be blow up. I mean, it'll be fighting somewhere. No investor is going to come. I mean, to your
mm,
place. So I think that's the lesson. I mean, we obviously learn. That's why. I mean, if you talk to Chinese, there was an overwhelming consensus to appreciate this world of stability. And because China is a very different case. We are 1.4 billion people. It's not like a Pakistan. Well, Pakistan is a big country, big population too, but we are
mm,
far, far bigger. And it's like you have one child, I have 50 children. It's a big challenge to manage a family with 15 or 50 children in China's case. So you have to really think really hard. I mean, what priority? It's not me, Chen Weihua's priority, probably. It's,
mm.
the priority of some other people sometimes. So because you have to take care of this huge one-fifth of humanity. I mean, it's a challenge no national leader in other country ever encountered, I would say.
Weihua, I truly, this is one more question. Maybe you can give me a one-word answer. In your view, do you think China will be behind the scenes, tipping the scales as much as it can in Iran's favor?
Well, I don't know what's behind the scene. I would say China will support Iran, obviously. Yeah, because we think the U.S. Israeli aggression against Iran is completely wrong, unlawful. So that's why we would be on the right side of history, right side of the international community, the United Nations, international law. So that's what you can count. I mean, all kinds of support. I think, definitely we will be on the right side.
Chen Weihua, veteran columnist and editor and bureau chief for China Daily for many, many years. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you have a boring Twitter feed, okay? We will link to his Twitter account here. It's how we discovered him. It's how many of us got to know China. Weihua, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you will join us again in the future.
Thank you very much. I mean, looking forward to it. I enjoy the talk very much.
Same here, same here. Take care and enjoy your further tours of China. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you again. Bye.
West Asia is always on the map, but rarely in its own voice. This region has been narrated by others for far too long. That's why the Cradle exists, to report from the region, not to speak over it.
Together, the United States
to tell stories with depth, precision, and no editorial leash. Because West Asia is more than just a theater of war. It's the corridor between continents, the energy artery of the world, the cradle of civilization. We don't take government orders. We don't serve corporate boards. We serve clarity, rarity, and rawness, no matter the risk. So if you believe this region deserves better than spin, support the people doing the legwork. Donate. Keep the Cradle independent.